Welcome to Telltales. I'm Mike Nicoletti. Every week, along with my co-hosts Jason Wallace and Hunt Lawrence, we bring you the cash flow memo. Get it at telltales.us. For the next 30 minutes, we're going to dive deep into energy, technology, and healthcare. So download the memo now and get started.
The following conversation is intended for informational purposes only. You should always do your own work to determine if an investment is suitable for you.
In terms of figuring out impact of the developing Trump administration on all these companies, okay, with Mike and Jason, I thought we could just turn pages, see how we do. We might need 2 weeks to do this. Exhibit C, same as last week. A lot's going to depend on what happens to Iran. I actually reduced the Iran production in 25 versus 24 by 500,000 barrels. Because unless Iran somehow comes around and makes a deal with the U.S. and the other countries who have sanctions, their oil production will definitely go down in 25. They produced 2 million barrels for export, and at the end of the first Trump administration, they're producing practically nothing for export. So it'll phase down fairly gradually. Most of the oil goes to China, and the Chinese will have to cooperate with the U.S. in the sanctions. And because the way refineries operate, you don't change crude slates all that frequently. It'll take a while to phase down. So to take at least 500,000 barrels a day out of their 25 production seemed warranted. It might be more. OPEC just came up with their new projections of demand. They're still projecting demand growth of 1.5 million barrels a day. And you can see here it's about 1.3 million. So we're still under the OPEC numbers. The IEA, which is the organization of consuming countries, is predicting virtually no growth in demand, mostly because of China. All mature economies go flat in oil production. Look at the U.S. in 22 is 20.3 and 24 it's 20.4. I mean, it just doesn't grow. Look at Europe, 14.3 and 22, 14.1 and 24. Look at Japan, 3.4 and 22, 3.2 and 24. Maybe that China's just getting mature. I made an adjustment a couple of weeks ago, just flat demand, 25 versus 24. And I took 500,000 barrels of it out. If you took another 1 million barrels a day, you'd be back where we were in 22, with Saudi Arabia producing 10.6, not 9.5 or 9 this year. And all the surplus capacity then would be Saudi Arabia. And they like to keep 2 million barrels a day of surplus capacity to kind of be the cushion in the supply in terms of their other supply disruptions. So we'd be back to normal without the Iranian export barrels. The oil prices on Exhibit B, the bottom, current price last Thursday was 71. Price is going to average about 73 and 24. Price by 26 is 67, so some backwardation. Just kind of steady as she goes. Natural gas, the next time we update these numbers for more than 102 Bs a day of production, Permian will be close to 20. The new pipelines come on out there, and still the price in West Texas, the Waha hub, is still negative. So it just shows how much associated gas there is with the oil. But if this volume forecast holds, in other words, 105 next year up from 102, most of that coming from the Permian, things ought to be okay because power will be up, LNG will finally be up. There will be more power demand because combined cycle plants under the Biden administration had that carbon capture. That won't be true on the Trump administration. And new LNG facilities were having trouble getting permitting under the Biden administration. That will not be true on the Trump administration. So both those things are good. The cash flow statement for the U.S. government, we now have Ramaswamy and Musk in charge of a mission to be more efficient in government. We'll see how they do. It's the all other category, which was like $900 billion in 2019. Now $1.4 trillion, that needs to come down. That should be possible. I think the other thing they're going to tackle is healthcare. And we're going to talk later about other companies in the 20 pages and impact from Trump. But I mean, I think there will be some significant effort to try to find ways to reduce the amount of healthcare spending we do as an economy. We're 17 or 18%, and that's 3 or 4% above any other developed country. So we'll get into that later. On page 20, I don't see too much to note. Mike or Jason, anything you see on page 20? DoorDash, Uber, Airbnb, those companies?
Yeah, we came up with a few things. Five Below imports most of its products from China, so if there's a tariff, that will certainly affect their business. On the plus side for Five Below, they've, like many other retailers, have suffered from significant shrinkage, I guess is the word, but just rampant theft in general, and that goes for all retailers. Five Below is one of many that have been affected by that. On Uber, DoorDash, and Airbnb, Trump said that they're not going to tax tips. So that should be a net positive, maybe increase driver supply for Uber, DoorDash, and well, I don't know about Airbnb. They don't really do tips, but Uber and DoorDash, they may see some increased supply.
All right. Next page is Jason's page. Next page is the healthcare page. Any of these companies particularly you single out, Jason?
Certainly. I think there's two big, I think each one of them, right, is impacted. Two big things going on is pharmacy benefit management. So PBM reform has gained traction in the current Congress. That's likely to continue, barring they get too distracted with other things that Trump brings up. But especially if they continue Lena Khan's tenure at the FTC, but I don't expect them to let PBMs off the hook, really, especially if they're looking for ways to squeeze or drive down costs in healthcare. This is probably the low-hanging fruit for them. Additionally, the CMS price negotiation on drugs is likely to continue and maybe pick up pace. Regeneron's already impacted. Their big drug Dupixent's already on the negotiation list, but it could certainly affect, additional drugs and Lilly included, especially if Lilly's big GLP-1 drugs.
Yeah, those price negotiations. I mean, he's floated a most favored nations clause, which for certain companies that's going to be, they would have to redo basically all their global contracts in order to maintain profitability.
Yeah.
Right.
And Vivek's background is healthcare with Roivant, so he'll have a lot of insight and ideas there, I'm sure.
Yeah. How much progress, Jason, do you think they can do in, say, before the 26 midterms on healthcare?
We've been talking about how hard they push here. Mike and I have been, and so Trump's in his second and final term. Elon's an outsider. Vivek certainly has future aspirations in government, but two of the three of those folks are, they could go scorched earth on it. There's no future past this. Elon's time horizons are, that of humanity. He wants to get humans to Mars, and Trump's, this is the punctuation mark on Trump's career. So,
well, also remember the Department of Governmental Efficiency, which they're setting up here, has a end date, which I thought was really interesting.
I didn't hear that.
Oh yeah, July 4th, 2026. So consumer with the 250-year anniversary.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be an interesting couple of 20 whatever months.
Page 18 reports the copper company. If you believe in copper, reports the one you want to own. Albemarle is lithium company. CF Industries is ammonia and fertilizer. And NextEra is the largest owner of wind. I think maybe the largest owner of solar. obviously subsidies for transition energy are basically going to be taken out of the system. I think that wind, solar, if they're economic and competitive with other power sources, ought to go forward. But I just don't see the logic of subsidies for them. The other three, lithium is for batteries. I'd like to draw Jason and Mike out on what they think about battery cars in the U.S. Lithium, it's possible, I suppose, that the Chinese battery manufacturers or someone figures out how to make batteries out of something other than lithium. But it seems, I think we've heard Jason on that before. That seems like very unlikely. But batteries for cars with lithium is kind of be with us for a long time. But all lithium runs through China, and they seem to be very good at lowering prices to discourage other people from coming into the lithium processing business. Any other thoughts there, Mike or Jason?
Yeah, I think I think electric vehicles are definitely here to stay, and we'll probably continue to see more growth in those EVs. I think that the market for lithium is difficult. I think any commodity market is difficult. There's a lot of lithium on the planet, and trying to gauge and match the supply and demand is not an easy task. We've seen the cost of lithium 10x during COVID and then fall back to its historical levels. And I don't expect any further major shocks to the system. And I think there's enough supply kind of at least in line that things are okay. Now, if you want to make a requirement that all lithium for American vehicles is produced domestically, that's going to change some things pretty dramatically. I do have some thoughts on CEF too, but Jason, if you've got...
Go for it.
On CEF, I think the jury's still out as to how much of an involvement RFK Jr. is going to have in the Trump administration. There's a lot of fertilizer that's used in our foods, and some countries have more and some have less restrictions on those. Maybe there is some risk there to industrial fertilizers that potentially could affect that business. But I think the jury's still out. I mean, some people think that RFK Jr. is actually going to have less of a role. Some people think he's going to have a very significant role. So we'll see.
Interesting. Keep track of that one. Page 17. Nothing seems to get in Costco's way. It's just always too expensive. Nike's going through a leadership change. United Parcel and FedEx compete with Amazon doing their own delivery. Anything else on page 17?
Well, I saw a stat that Amazon's expected to deliver more packages than the U.S. Postal Service next year.
Do you think we'll have a U.S. Postal Service next year?
That's right. It brings up that question, right? They've talked about scaling it back or limits there, and maybe that comes back on the table.
Nike, I guess, would be hurt by tariffs, but Apple avoided all that, and we'll get to Apple later or next week, but Apple avoided all that. I just kind of think someone like Nike are making a lot of stuff in Asia will somehow the tariffs won't hurt them, but maybe that's too optimistic a view. What about the restaurant stocks on the next page? Do you think they have risk in terms of trying to reorient our food?
Yeah. Well, I think maybe the least worse off of those is probably Chipotle. But McDonald's, I would be pretty concerned about, again, how influential RFK Jr. is. Could dramatically change their supply chain. There could be some pretty significant impact. Starbucks, if we end up with tariffs from, blanket tariffs across the board, it could significantly increase their cost of goods on coffee.
Yep.
So I think Celsius, pretty much everything there is sourced domestically, is bottled domestically. Don't see much of an issue there.
Right. Hilton just looks like a solid business. They're kind of franchising hotels. It looks, pretty well put together business. Next page is Jason, the Pfizer page. Any of these less fun? I would, maybe just because we like it, but I'd say Vertex is less impacted than say Pfizer.
But they manufacture their drugs in China, right?
That's true. That is true.
A lot of material that goes into drug discovery and production is imported.
Right.
So certainly has impacts.
Right.
Moderna and BioNTech are on there, and RFK has his opinions about vaccines, and they're a big vaccine maker. I think at a minimum, we're going to see more long-term studies of the impact of vaccines.
Yeah.
Right.
And Pfizer's likely to be in the crosshairs just for being a big pharmaceutical company.
Yeah. Page 14 is the cat deer page. General economy, strong economy, I think, is important for cat and deer. Don't understand, every time it comes up, I don't understand why Genrite doesn't do better, given all the need that we have for backing up either in bad weather or just backing up grid. But they don't. They seem to be in a great business with kind of so-so performance. TransDigm is one of those businesses that just kind of grinds it out every year.
Oh, but that one's, I think, the one that has the highest risk. Well, maybe not. Yeah, maybe the highest risk here. Because if you're going to reduce regulations in the federal government, the FAA is on that list, and the FAA is what essentially makes the TransDigm business as great as it is. It costs so much money to get certified as a manufacturer of a part that there's essentially no competition. So I think that's actually a dark horse in this whole, and that's a great business. It's just.
That is a vulnerability. Yeah. The financial stocks on page 13. I guess less regulation would be good.
Mm-hmm. He did say in the temporarily they're going to cap credit card interest rates at 10%. So that wouldn't help those guys. But
yeah, more of an impact on J.P. Morgan than Morgan Stanley or Goldman Sachs.
Right.
Interactive is another one of those just kind of grinded out kind of businesses. They just are much lower cost in what is effectively a service business.
Again, if they crack into SEC and SEC regulations, I mean, the expansion in the financial sector workforce over the past, basically since Dodd-Frank, has, I think, essentially all of the job additions have been compliance related.
Right.
So there's, it's not that we're going to throw away compliance, but the question is, in this period of time that this Department of Governmental Efficiency is put in place, can they put up more effective goals and targets for methods to regulate these banks? I don't think anybody's proposing that they don't do anything, but
right.
less would be preferential, that's for sure.
Yeah. And then, of course, we have the saga of the Federal Reserve Chairman. I kind of imagine that Powell will resign a little early to, if fix Powell's successor. I hope if he does intend to pick Powell's successor, he does it promptly. One of the things that got us into trouble was the Biden administration waiting to replace Powell. That was just wrong for all kinds of reasons, or waiting to give him another term. So,
I think Jay Powell's job was transitory. His appointment.
Right. Right. On Fed independence, remember the other members, well, the different Federal Reserve banks, those are all the Dallas Federal Reserve, those heads of those banks are elected by people in the Dallas Federal Reserve. So I do think the independence of the Fed's pretty secure. Mike or Jason, you disagree with that, or?
I don't have an opinion. I just hope it's secure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm more interested in getting some more confidence in the data that comes out of the BLS. The data that the Fed supposedly bases a lot of decisions on. So.
Yeah, better data would be good. Page 12, we're making incredible progress here. We still have 6 minutes left. The gas page, all these companies, as I mentioned earlier, benefit from better gas demand. And I think Trump administration, by lifting the hold on new LNG facilities and making combined cycle gas plants less regulated, carbon sequester, I think that'll all be good for the gas companies. Next page is the oil companies. Price of oil is very important, but he reimposes the Iran sanctions. That will help close the surplus. Next page is the midstream companies. Kind of like the gas companies, I would say. More volume going through their systems will mean more cash flow, which is good. Next, the Exxon page. These companies are pretty diversified, but they certainly are impacted by the price of oil, price of natural gas, volumes. So I think they'll all benefit. Next page is the Walmart page. Walmart, and there's a lot of stuff that are sold in this space to go to retail as well. Carmack's a retailer too. The question about tariffs and impact on the retail businesses, I frankly think it won't be that much of an impact. But with that, going to turn over to Mike and Jason for their commentary.
Back to what we said earlier, I think the crime thing's been an issue, especially for Target on this list. That would be on the plus side. Maybe that gets better in most places. The other thing that Trump's talked about are baby bonuses, so either tax credits or something to try to spur baby boom. That would be good for a lot of these guys. The downside is they all still import a lot of products from China, so it all kind of hangs in the balance as to if there's any tariffs.
Yeah. To Target specifically, they stopped development in California and then and paused all new development. Now that we've in the state here, we've made crime illegal again. They might look at expansion within the state again.
Okay, let's take a quick break for a message from Oakcliff Sailing.
Don Riley with Oakcliff here again, and we've had a lot of October surprises. First of all, we're getting all the boats out of the water, the Match 40s. Almost all the rigs are down, a couple of boats are out, and we have a great team of volunteers here and staff members checking all of the sail to make sure that they're ready to go in the springtime. We're already thinking about that. We have a new team member, Harry, who is joining us on the shore side. And then we also have our high-performance high school sailor who's down sailing on a NACRA 15 that was donated by Hannah Sweat. So we're going to go down to the beach and see how he's doing. And over the weekend, we had an amazing weekend of racing in the Halloween Invitational. Peter Wickwire and the Canadians filled out the podium. And now we got to figure out how to get more match races in here. We have a World Match Racing Tour Academy next summer, and that will all be posted on our website shortly. Our brochures are going out, and I'm going to leave you with a really cool video of some amazing racing and 30 knots of wind. Probably the biggest surprise was no damage. Love that. We're going to have an excellent end of the month of October with Halloween tomorrow, 75, 80 degrees, and I will see you next Wednesday.
And now back to the show.
Right. I'd like to take the remaining 5 minutes, leave page 7 on for next week. Let's take the remaining 5 minutes and talk a little bit about Iran and the Mideast. I think it's pretty clear that the Ukraine will be settled, I think, by taking Ukraine into NATO, which will improve NATO because the best fighting force in Europe now is the Ukraine's. Probably do a lot to deter Russia from further things like the Ukrainian invasion and trying anything like that. I'd like to talk about China, though, and I know Mike and Jason and I are going to have a different view here, so let me lay out my view, which may be entirely too optimistic. I think with the impact of Musk and Vance with some background in venture capital as well as law school training, I don't think restricting China for chips for AI or machines to make them or whatnot makes too much sense. And I think most tech people will say it just seems to me 18, 24 months, some entities in China will figure out how to do it themselves. I also think that the situation with Taiwan is simply a matter of hewing to the two China policies so that it doesn't have to be like Hong Kong, where it's just an extension of the mainland government, but it just has to be, less divisive than it has been. You can't have the House Speaker, call, when that's clearly a no-no, call on the government of Taiwan. And it seems to me that will be, Trump might head that way in any direction, but the impact of Musk and other people out of the tech industry will head that way. And now that may be way too optimistic, and I do think that will reduce a lot of tension and be good for China, be good for the U.S., be good for other countries that engage in trade or other activity with China. But having laid that out in the remaining few minutes, Mike and Jason, where is that just way too optimistic a view?
Yeah, I agree that the sanctions on semiconductor equipment and chip supply and doesn't make much sense. Especially we talk a lot about the ASML lithography machines. There's other ways to produce chips. Just we decided on lithography as the best way in the way we produce the power for those machines and the deep UV light. It was the most cost-effective decision at the time, but there's other ways, and China has extremely cheap power, and they can produce, without going into too much details, they can produce the chips in other ways, and I have no doubt that they're working on that right now. So the sanctions are only going to, in the limits, they're only going to last for so long. So why bother with them? And we should be making them more dependent on our equipment suppliers. But I think it's going to be very unpopular to decide to say that we're gonna lift those restrictions on China. I think public sentiment would have to change a lot for that to happen. And ego maybe would have to change.
Well, I think some government defense workers and defense agencies would have to change their posture pretty dramatically. And Trump's got the same trade czar or whatever that he had in the last term. So I think they're still going to be openly, hostile is probably not the right word, but they will be looking for the best deal that we can get. And I think that that ultimately means, and they often talk about the trade deficit, and the trade deficit doesn't get better if they don't buy anything from us. So we want them to buy from us. That also, balances out our peaceful or chance at a peaceful relation. The concessions we'd like to see is less IP theft. We'd like to see some assurances that we're not too worried about their military. We certainly have a cost problem in this country, and we've talked about the cost of the Iranian drones versus our missiles that we use to shoot them down, right? 100x differential. I watched an interview the other day with a Chinese tech company executive talking about how they managed to train a model that they claim to be on par with GPT-4, that they spent $3 million to train, and they weren't able to use the latest chips. So I'm a little puzzled by the statement, but remember how we've talked about this from the beginning is what happens when you restrict access to, in this case, the latest chips. You throw your engineering resources at trying to solve the problem a different way. So, you end up creating a monster with some of these things. So we're hopeful that some of the people that are involved will take a more rational stance and step forward.
Yeah. We'll have more on this next week. We'll get to the front of the memo, and there's more impact on especially these tech companies who have China as a major market. But that will be here 7 days from now, and everyone be well and stay healthy. Take care.
The views expressed on this podcast are the host alone and do not constitute an offer to sell or a recommendation to purchase or a solicitation of an offer to buy any security nor a recommendation for any investment product or service. While certain information contained herein has been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, neither the hosts nor any of their employers or their affiliates have independently verified this information, and its accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed. Accordingly, no representation or warranty, expressed or implied, is made as to, and no reliance should be placed on, the fairness, accuracy, timeliness, or completeness of this information. The hosts and all employers and their affiliated persons assume no liability for this information and no obligation to update the information or analysis contained herein in the future, and may or may not hold positions in the securities mentioned.